Good morning, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar on the 3 greatest fears for charities data and how to address them with Microsoft. The 3 biggest fears are user adoption, security and cost, and I'll now give you a brief intro to Softwerx and Cloud 2020. Softwerx has been a Microsoft Gold partner for over 20 years and is a leading Microsoft cloud security provider. We help organisations across the UK and Europe secure their businesses through the design and deployment of end-to-end Microsoft security and compliance solutions. And Cloud 2020 are a Microsoft certified partner and leading Microsoft business applications specialist. Their focus on Dynamics 365 and Power Apps enable them to keep up to date with the latest and greatest features and technologies. It allows them to build a platform for businesses that will scale and support the business's growth and goals. I'll first cover off some housekeeping as we kick off. Please note the webinar is recorded. You'll receive a copy of the webinar afterwards if you'd like to go back to refer to it. And finally, there's a chance to ask questions in the Q&A panel, and those will be addressed at any point during the discussion. I'll now like to invite my colleague Patrick to introduce the speakers.
Hi and good morning. Yes, my name is Patrick. I'm the marketing manager here at Softwerx. Really glad to have you all join today, and really excited for the contents that we'll be covering in this live panel with our experts from Cloud 2020 as well as Softwerx. So as Phoebe mentioned, Softwerx are Microsoft Cloud Security Specialists. We're based in Cambridge, and we're very pleased to be joined with our partners Cloud 2020, who are Microsoft Dynamics specialists and have loads of experience in the charity sector, as well helping charities make the most of their really valuable data. So before we really kick off, I'd love for each of the panelists that we've got on today to just introduce themselves. So and then we'll dive into the discussion. So I'd like to invite Ian. Can you introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, hi everybody, Ian Bourne here, CEO of Cloud 2020, and I have the absolute pleasure of running a company that includes my colleague Wendy here today, and we're very passionate about Microsoft Dynamics and also the Power Apps. So we specialise in that, and then we work alongside our partners like Softwerx, where they bring their expertise alongside what we do as well. So that's who we are, and I think over to Wendy now.
Hi there, thanks for the invitation, Patrick. Really delighted to be here, and thanks for that great summary. I have the pleasure of working with Ian Bourne here, the CEO of Cloud 2020. We've been working in the Dynamics 365 and Power Platform arena now for around 7 years. We have lots of experience with working with some charities and not-for-profits here, and I'm delighted to be here today. I work more on the customer-facing side and the sales side within Cloud 2020.
Brilliant, thanks so much. Great to have you guys on. And we said we'd also introduce a hobby or something else of interest. So I think we've been talking about our favourite biscuits recently. Wendy, is there something that kind of keeps you
going,
keeps you busy?
Yeah.
At your desk?
Well, yes, we were talking about biscuits yesterday, Patrick, and I know that you are a little bit of a dark chocolate digestive fan. As I displayed yesterday, I like a fig roll. I do like a fig roll with a cup of coffee. I pretend to myself that that's because they are mostly fruit, and that's the way I can allow them into my house.
One of your 5 a day, Wendy, brilliant.
Yeah, it's part of my 5 a day, definitely. Ian, I don't know what your favourite biscuit is.
Well, there's the thing. Dark chocolate, yeah, absolutely, or chocolate chip cookies.
Oh, great choice. Okay, on that note, thank you, Ian and Wendy. So Nick Catling, over to you. What is your favourite biscuit? And then you can maybe tell us a bit about yourself.
My favourite biscuit would have to be a Fox's biscuit. One of those is like the chocolate chips inside, and then like a chocolate coating on the other half. They're probably my favourite ones. Very tasty indeed, which is always good. I'm the only one who likes them, so that's even better. Happy days. Yes, hello everyone. So thanks Patrick. My name is Nick Catling. I'm the account director for charities at Softwerx. You can probably tell I'm not as yellow as I am in my picture, but that is probably my main hobby, although as you'll see the orange jumper to match. Yes, so account director for charities, working hard to kind of promote the Softwerx approach, Microsoft first ethos. So not only Microsoft, but Microsoft first. There's a lot to be had and said by using more of Microsoft's services to really help support charities. So yeah, that's the whole main reason, obviously, for Ian, Wendy and myself to be on this call to talk to you all about it. But yeah, I mean, as you'll see, main hobby, Lego, and plenty more of that to come.
Fantastic. Okay, thanks, Nick. And for the audience, you would have met Phoebe at the very beginning. She's the outreach and events coordinator here at Softwerx, and I won't put her on the spot just yet, but you'll see her again at the end, and maybe I will find out what her biscuit of choice is. So in the meantime, we can, I think, really kick off. And so what we mentioned is that we'd be diving into the three biggest fears that charities experience with regards to IT and their data. And that's all, I think, wrapped around this concept of digital transformation and the challenges and opportunities that that really throws up. So just to really set the scene, we identified these three major fears as being security, cost, and user adoption, which will really locate around the issue of data protection, using your data, making the most of the data, and of course it cuts across issues like fundraising, issues like managing your database, issues like personally identifiable information of donors and all sorts of things, managing volunteers, and so there's loads to explore. And as you can see, there are some stats up on the slide at the moment talking about the digital strategy that charities have, and how very few are actually able to thoroughly embed the process into their organization and really have as an organization the resources to, I think, tackle it the way that they really like to and actually make the most of it. And as we can see, we've got 75% increase in the digital skills sector that would increase fundraising, and that 60% think that this digital transformation will help create better services. So it sounds like there is a significant opportunity there. So on that note, I'd like to throw a question over to Nick Catling, account director for security at Softwerx for Charities. And so Nick, you've got a lot of hands-on experience with supporting charities and addressing this issue of security and securing data. How do you understand these issues that charities are facing regarding that, and how do you see them dealing with it at the moment?
Thanks, Patrick. It's a good question. I suppose we see it a lot in terms of it's mainly the data, I think, is probably now the biggest goal for any kind of cyber criminal, and probably the biggest goal for any charity. And by that, I mean, with obviously the impact that COVID and the pandemic have had over the past 1.5 to 2 years, the usual method of collecting data, donators, information, money, etc., obviously wasn't able to happen, with people not being able to kind of be there, etc. So charities, then obviously having to think of a different way of kind of keeping themselves going, still providing the services they need for the donations they need to receive, etc. And it's their information, their data, that's now kind of key to their survival, unearthing what's their kind of the relevance to the information that's there. Hence why companies like Cloud 2020 and Wendy and Ian and what they do, using Microsoft in a way to unearth what's there, is going to be key to kind of getting that information. But the sad probably fact of the reality of it is that perhaps charities haven't realized that as quickly as cyber criminals have. I mean, we're always, security wise, in a kind of constant defense battle as opposed to being on the front foot, shall we say. It'd be nice to be on the front foot, but it is this defensive battle we have to play where they kind of always one step ahead. Let's kind of block them there. One step ahead, let's block them there. So that's where the security part really for us kind of comes in, is they already know the data is worth a lot of money. Let's try and get that data protected. So we see a lot of conversations around the Microsoft offerings, especially around kind of the licensing that's in place and making sure you've got the right licensing. There's a lot of charities who don't realize, for instance, that they can get 10 free Microsoft 365 Business Premium licenses, which are fundamental to giving you the right level of security in place initially to kind of keep the charity protected. And then you can kind of really go from there, to be honest, Patrick. I think that's where I would see it happening, or my thoughts on kind of the matter.
Brilliant, thanks a lot. Well, yeah, you mentioned those 10 free licenses and different things that charities ways that charities can benefit from the special provisions that I think Microsoft do make, but we'll probably come back to that a little bit later. But thanks, Nick. I'd like to then invite Ian to comment a little bit around the issues, the other fears that we identified in terms of, user adoption and cost, and maybe Ian, you can just dive into that a little bit and flesh that out for us.
Yeah, certainly, Patrick, absolutely. I'd just like to pick up on a really important point that Nick said. Obviously, you guys come very much from the security aspect. It's something that we also take extremely seriously, because we're conscious that we are effectively helping charities to manage access to their data, which is critical, and they need to access that data to be effective. But that also means, therefore, they are a potential conduit to that data. So two aspects of that. One is how we operate with charities to make, when we deploy a solution for them, we minimize wherever possible any transmission of data, any access to data. We make sure we implement all the security that comes with the Microsoft platform to put that in place. And I'm certainly conscious recently that like yourselves, Nick and Patrick, we keep up to date with the constant feedback from the National Cybersecurity Team about how we as suppliers to a charity or an organization have responsibility to not act as a gate into that, because of the kind of access we have to set these platforms up. So I think that's really important. But come back to the question you asked me, really costs and user adoption. User adoption, and they're linked, let's be honest, because when you put a platform in, there's a cost of doing that. There's a cost of actually implementing it. No platform will be 100% appropriate to an organization. There's always some configuration or possibly customization that needs to be done. We really, these days, avoid coding. Wherever possible, we don't do that because we don't need to. The platform these days enables us to do some really incredibly powerful things without having to reach for code, which is great. So that's makes update and maintenance down the line a lot easier. But there's a huge cost in that. So user adoption is critical, because it's all very well us putting these great tools and platforms in, but if the users don't use it, then we're all wasting our time, clearly, and money. Now, there are extra dimensions with charities, obviously, and obviously the audience here are going to be, I hope, nodding. But the issue here is you don't just have permanent employees, but you also have volunteers, and therefore there's an extra need to understand how you get that training, but also for us, before that, an understanding of what those permanent employees and the volunteers need to do an efficient job, effectively. And once you understand that, we can then implement it properly, but then they have to get the buy-in from them. We have to get the buy-in from them through training and support as it's deployed. So user adoption is massively important. I know it's a particular favourite topic of Wendy. I can see her smiling here going, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Cost, what I think traditionally there's been a almost a scare factor amongst charities about costs. I think it's fair to say now that there are it's a less scary scenario, particularly with what we can do for charities, because we build on the standard platform for Microsoft in terms of either Power Platform or Dynamics, and Microsoft now provide us with a phenomenally feature-rich accelerator for not-for-profit organisations. Or we can drop that straight into the platform, and if you want to pick up on that later on, we can do that, certainly, Patrick. But that gets us an awfully long way down the road. It's then that understanding of what the users really need for that particular organisation, and for us and our team then to make that happen. So the cost of we're not building something from scratch here. We're taking a very good platform that's had the benefit of thousands and thousands of hours of user input to deploy it initially, and then tailor it to an organization's needs. So those costs of deployment now are substantially lower, and also the time taken to deploy and configure and deploy are much lower as well.
Thanks, Ian. Yeah, that's really helpful, I think, to put the costs in perspective, and also to connect the two issues of user adoption and cost. And as users of Microsoft Dynamics ourselves, I think we're quite aware of the abilities of, for example, that product out of the box. We've got a rough idea of what the costs are for us, and also the usage and how the usage ends up adding up potentially if you go over quota or within your quotas. And then you've got costs of, like you say, customization and the low code or even no code options around that, which are I think increasingly popular, like you say, on various different platforms to avoid those costs kind of spiraling and to keep it really manageable. So yeah, I think that's really helpful context. So I think at this point we can really move into a bit more of digging into what these solutions are that we've touched on so far in terms of addressing some of these concerns, whether it's security, whether it's cost, and we can start to flesh that out a little bit more from your own experience. So this would be a question, I think, back to you, Nick. So with data protection and with the strategy that you mentioned, I think you mentioned Microsoft coming into play with a lot of solutions that maybe charities aren't aware of or haven't necessarily rolled out, which they may have access to. Can you talk a bit more about what you've seen, how charities might have implemented a security solution, even with maybe limited resources, and have actually seen the tangible benefits from that?
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. Certainly can. I suppose it's probably most important to say why we're doing it as well. So for us at Softwerx, as I mentioned, we run on a Microsoft first approach. So great colleague of mine, our technical director, will often mention you pay a Microsoft tax for a reason. You get quite a bit from them, but it's just knowing exactly what you can get from them and how you can use it to the best of its abilities, and to obviously kind of continue saving money. Let's face it, a lot of charities will want to get the best they can without having to spend too much money, and I don't blame them. That makes most sense. So that's why our Microsoft first approach resonates kind of well with them, using Microsoft solutions and facilities, especially when you consider we conducted a survey of over 100 IT professionals in the charitable sector recently, and they came along and mentioned that 89% of the respondents were mentioning that the complexity of the cybersecurity marketplace is increasing. So I mean, nearly 9 out of 10 of them saying that it's just too complex to work out what I should be using and where I should be using it and how I should be using it. And especially if you're on a kind of constrained budget, this Microsoft first approach makes absolute sense. And we've seen quite a lot of organizations, charities benefit from this approach. So for us, it starts off with a discovery workshop, or kind of like a security assessment, So we can kind of go through, spend a bit of time, understand what you've got at the moment, and more importantly, why you chose it, and then spend the time talking through how, by a slight change to a different license, as I mentioned before, the 10 free licenses of the 365 Business Premium and all of the benefits that underlie those in terms of, for instance, security wise, like your Azure information protection. You've got a bit of the Intune in there as well in terms of device management, along with conditional access. There's so much in there that you can have, depending on the size of the charity, completely free or indeed heavily discounted to protect you. It's phenomenal what you can do. And we've seen organizations change from what they currently had to these new ones, these new licenses, dropping probably quite a lot of the third-party services or solutions they had in place, such as antiviruses being dropped in use of Microsoft's own version, or perhaps the email security program they've got in place. Was it an unnecessary expense when you can now get Defender for Office 365 Plan 1 as part of your business premium license? And it does a really good job of protecting the organization, especially when we now consider Teams, such as we're using, is the kind of the forerunner in terms of kind of collaboration and networking tools and speaking to people and having these like webinars on a kind of, well, dare we say daily basis is perhaps a bit too much, but on a fairly frequent basis. So ensuring that the information we provide, data we provide through the different sources of communication are secure is paramount, and that's where the business premium license can help. And then you've got kind of other organizations we've helped in terms of the cloud migration or a cloud adoption, moving away from having on-prem, which is no longer, well, possibly fit for purpose now, with everyone having to work from home on a more frequent basis, or possibly just completely working from home, such as we are now. And for that, you can kind of start to do projects which perhaps utilize the Azure service credits that organizations can get. So the $3,500 of Azure service credits that are available for eligible nonprofits, they've been really useful in helping kind of set up projects where people can kind of demonstrate, well, I can move my storage to the cloud, or I can do my information that way. It's just different methods of using, and it's for us communicating all of these different aspects, the donations that Microsoft offer, and making the most of them. I think that's the biggest part of it, really. Patrick, hopefully that answers the question, unless I've just rambled for 5 minutes. But yeah, that's, I think, where we're heading, and that's where we're seeing the most traction, is just basically unearthing what Microsoft offer for organizations.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. That's yeah, I think that's helpful to know a bit more about Business Premium. And yeah, from what I understand, there is a rich security set within that, which is also always being updated. And in fact, even if that's your only layer of security, that itself, if it's properly configured, can provide you a very basic but rich set of security that will protect you on the endpoint, as well as through email and other layers. And I'm sure there's the more that we could talk about perhaps in the next section when we start looking forwards a little bit. But at this point, yeah, I'd love to invite Wendy to tell us a little bit more about addressing these questions. So we've talked a bit now about security and we've touched on user adoption and cost. But when it comes to really making the most of this valuable data, some people are saying, oh, you know, data's the new oil, data's the new gold. It's this real sense of having these valuable assets which A, need to be protected, and B, you know, if you are doing a good job, you could really be making the most of not just from a fundraising perspective, but from gaining those insights into who you're dealing with, and maybe things that you never even realized that you could find out just from having the right views on the data. So yeah, Wendy, can you tell us a bit more from you know, that perspective?
Thanks, Patrick. And I'm just wondering here if data is the new printer ink, actually, because I think it's actually worth more than oil, isn't it?
That's right.
So, sorry, Ian?
Yeah, I believe it's. I just saw a stat showing printer ink versus 18-year-old aged whiskey, and in fact, per milliliter, printer ink was by far more valuable.
Do not drink it. So I think when we're talking about cost here, I mean, I looked at some stats just before I came on board to this webinar, just as a little bit of research around things. And I just wonder if you've got any ideas about how much dollars were donated by Microsoft last year in terms of software and services to the not-for-profit arena. Any guesses?
I'd go with 750 million.
750
million?
Yeah.
How about you, Ian?
It's going to be a big number. Yeah, I mean, I know the number of charities that are taking the benefits of the free software is huge, and but there's still some that aren't, as Patrick's identifying and Nick's identifying. I wouldn't even hazard a guess.
Okay. So I'll put you out of your misery here. It's 1.4 billion in software and services just last year. And I know this is a really big thing for Microsoft, very much part of their CSR, very much part of how they want the world to see them as well. You mentioned the Microsoft tax in it. It's not always received well. Let's put it like that. And I think we need to understand why we might actually consider the Microsoft first process, why that works in your world and why that would work in our world. And I think the first question I'd like to ask about cost is, when you're identifying the costs of coming along on this journey, what are the costs of staying where you are? What are the costs of rumbling on with that on-prem CRM that you've got, sitting in the corner, gathering dust, probably not patched, probably, all kinds of security risks and very much out of date. And particularly, if you're trying to manage a remote working workspace for everybody that's within your organization, you're having to do an awful lot of work there to bring that very old solution up into the cloud and hosting desktops and all of the rest of it. So in many ways, when people are considering the cost, they're not considering the potential costs of staying where they are. And I think they're considerable. So I think it's important for us to ask that question when we're talking to people. Have you considered the cost of staying where you are, actually? And if you're not going to stay where you are, then this is a very obvious solution to that problem. The issues that people have around things like worrying about user adoption, when you're looking at a Dynamics 365 solution, it seamlessly interfaces with all of those other business applications that you know so well. Office, your Outlook, all of those things that your volunteers, if you're a charity, are well used to working with, even if they're not in a kind of working environment any longer, because they might be retired, they might have disabilities and not be able to engage in full-time work. But often that concern about how are your users going to use it, are they going to like it, what are they going to do with it, I think we can allay by saying actually a lot of this will look like things that they're already familiar with. And then of course we're looking at some productivity gains around that user adoption, around this solution then for yourselves. And let's face it, not-for-profits and charities, and I like to distinguish really between those two things, because I think Microsoft uses the term not-for-profit, which is very much a commercial legal status within American law. But in the UK, we would want to really refer to charities, because there are quite rigorous application processes that you have to go through in order to gain access to these benefits. So you have to be a registered charity, you have to be able to point to your number on the charity with the Charity Commission, all of that kind of stuff. So if we're really talking about charities here, and onboarding staff, around onboarding volunteers, all of those management of those things are a concern really to charities. The thing about this accelerator, which Ian's mentioned earlier, and I think we'll talk about a little more deeply after I've spoken, is around managing your members, you know, increasing your fundraising and supporting your donors. And if you think about that, if you're doing that, then really your return on investment is going to happen pretty damn quickly, isn't it? Because you want to support your donors, you want to make sure they keep going with that, you want to make sure your fundraising's carrying on, particularly in the kind of environment we're in at the moment. As Nick mentioned earlier, most charities would have been out on the streets and haven't been able to do that for the last 18 months. So increasing your fundraising using digital means, I think, is very important. And for that, you need your data secure, and you need to make sure you've got a platform that will manage those interactions and keep track. Who's talking to who? Who's last been in touch with the donors? Do they all know about this online fundraising event that we're having? All of that kind of good. It's very important, very basic stuff that is taken care of within the solution for charities here, I think. So the accelerator, as Ian mentioned earlier, you know, this provides us with the opportunity of having a relatively quick deployment that will really give you 80% of what you need, because it's built into the solution. There may be some customization, and obviously we would prefer to go down the no-code route for that in order to maintain the costs at low, and also support costs ongoing, because that is a consideration for charities as well, I think. But as we said, Nick mentioned earlier, there's the Microsoft 365 licenses that are available, Business Premium. There are Power Apps, they call it a Dynamics 365 grant, and basically there are 5 free Dynamics 365 licenses, and the rest are at a very highly discounted rate for those people that can fulfill the requirements really with Microsoft. And then also now Power Apps, 10 Power Apps users. Now I'm thinking that's opened up the playing field enormously for people. So I could go on, Patrick, as you know, but I won't at this point, because I know we've got lots to say, but hopefully I've answered your question and kind of elaborated a little bit more on what you asked there.
Yeah, that's brilliant, Wendy. And in fact, that made me think of, you know, ourselves and the actual apps and say Microsoft Dynamics tools that we've been using. And, you know, this, for example, this platform, if you're a charity and you want to run an event, are you using a third-party webinar provider at a monthly fee? Or, you know, are you using, for example, Microsoft Teams, which has its own inbuilt webinar platform, which is really good and allows you to manage your registrations and do all of these things, as well as record it within your CRM system. So, someone at Microsoft has been thinking through all these things and joining all these dots together and actually building all that functionality in. What about, is it email outreach, and are you using, again, a third-party app for that? And have you considered that, for example, Dynamics has that ability to actually automate a lot of your email outreach within the same CRM license, rather than using one CRM and then another app to do email, for example, and tie it all together? So, you know, from my own experience, that's something that we benefited from. And I think, there are probably loads of charities out there that could do, and even with those discounts built in, make it really effective. So really cost effective and effective. So thanks, Wendy. So this is, I think, bringing us into the third section of the panel, and we really wanted to paint a bit of a picture, not just about the current state of play, and we've talked about, you know, business premium licenses and discounts that are available, which is fantastic, and, you know, why people should be moving off on-prem onto the cloud, and how Dynamics can actually help with that, to secure your data and address these costs. But I think that it's good to look a bit more at the bigger picture as well, and in terms of the whole technology shift, the whole role of digital transformation, and these say, let's call it board level, trustee level issues, that when you're in a trustee meeting in a charity, you want to know about, you want to tell the board about if you're not on, if you're advising the board, and you want to justify, you know, what your long-term strategy is. So let's talk big picture stuff here. And I think for that, it's good to be a bit more forward thinking. And so, Ian, if I can ask you a little bit more about this. So for example, if we talk forward thinking, I think we start thinking about roadmaps. We start thinking, how is our technology now going to keep up with things that are coming, whether it's new trends, new technologies, new platforms, new processes. And so can you just tell us a bit more about how you understand, say, Dynamics or the whole Microsoft engagement piece for charities, and what is their strategy for keeping up, and not just keeping up, but actually pushing the boundaries for innovating, for providing real value in the next year, the next 5 years, even the next 10 years?
Wow, where do I start?
You've got 5 minutes.
I could feel a whole PhD dissertation coming out of this one. Great question, though, really great question. And I think it really loops back quite strongly to the point that Wendy was making early on, which is that the cost is not just about the running cost, it's about the cost of not doing it. If you don't do this, charities are in competition with each other. They're in competition with businesses for attention, for people's attention, and more importantly, money. So if you almost don't get involved with this, you are going to get left behind. And I don't think that's overstating the case. I think it's a truism. If we think about, and the point you picked up on there, Patrick, about all the different elements involved. So in this day and age, you need to engage with your audience, and that is, and of course, with a charity, that's not just donors. It might be organisations making major sponsorship contributions. It's individuals. It might be households, and also the volunteers that effectively are giving you effort without any cost input, and that all has to be managed, and that is not just email these days. We're now talking in terms, as Wendy and you brought out, Teams is such a great collaboration tool for making things happen, and people expect to be able to communicate in that kind of way. It's just the modern way people operate these days, especially after the last 18 months or so, when there are some organisations that have been driven into that, because otherwise they just would not exist. I think also, if you think about the way we talk these days, it has to be around social as well. People talk around social. People generate interest around social. It's an accessibility approach. So the platform has to be able to integrate with all those different channels of communication. But what you don't want to have to do is be able to do that through umpteen different disparate platforms, because that just builds in a whole, stand fast the whole security issue around multiple platforms, which I'm sure you guys will pick up on. But it's also just that the moment a user drops from one platform to another platform, their productivity drops through the floor. So the more you can focus that user on what they're trying to achieve through one gateway on their machine or on their phone or whatever, tablet, or however they're interacting with you, then the more you can give them that focus to get on with the job. So this is all I'm saying here, I think, really is the more you can bring your channels of communication and your messaging and your outreach to your audience, which is wide in the charity sector, the more efficient you're going to get, the more funding you're going to get, the more good you're going to be able to do for your particular cause. But hey, where are we going? Well, I think more and more it's around that collaboration. It's around seamless integration and bringing it together. The good news is that Microsoft, as Wendy said, are absolutely on board with it. That figure that they give away in just purely licensing, free licensing, it's crazy. It starts with the word billion. Come on, that's a big number. But alongside that, Microsoft invests heavily in supporting the approach. So, for example, the accelerator we talked about, That's built, that's given away, so we can help you drop that straight into our platform. And if you want to see it, then give us a shout. We're very happy to put that platform together and drop one in for you to have a look at and see what it does. And straight away, the language is built in there, and the type of format. So it understands that there are donors and organizations and individuals and families and so on. So it understands that. So a lot of that is and that best practice is built in there. Now, of course, it's trying to be all things to all people. So therefore, whilst it understands gifts and donations, it doesn't necessarily understand UK law around gift aid, but that's very simple for us to support. And all we're doing there is making those little tweaks to make it absolutely relevant to the environment that we're talking about. Last week, there was a major Microsoft conference. It happens every year. It's called Ignite. And that's actually a really good term. And there, Microsoft reiterated their commitment to the not-for-profit sector. They have key verticals that they focus in, and the not-for-profit one is absolutely there. They're committed to it. It comes straight out of their global mission, and they announced a lot more in terms of what the platform will do as they're going forward. So they're committing to the platform, they're committing to the whole ethos of supporting not-for-profit, and it's completely in their DNA. I think also this fits in with a lot of other elements as well, like corporate social responsibility, zero carbon, and other initiatives, which all sit in the same corporate service responsibility arena. So on one side, there's technical support and commitment. On the other side, it's the whole ethos and commitment to the sector. So very exciting times. And how do we keep up to date with it? Well, that's why we as an organization only focus on Dynamics and the Power Platform, because it takes us all our time to keep up to date with it. There is so much good stuff coming out all the time. That's why we focus there. That's why we work with you guys, Patrick and Nick, because you guys keep up to date with security, and that's a really good interface between the two of us. You do, and you keep up to date with that. It means we can relax and leave you guys to concentrate on that. But it's our job to keep up to date with what's going on from the business apps perspective. I can tell you now, the roadmap is exciting. I could go on for hours, Nick. Patrick, you better stop me. You all right?
Great, brilliant, thank you, Ian. And yeah, that's really helpful. I think that what we could actually do is address a couple of questions that have come up, because this would be a good moment to just answer a few of them that have come up. So I see someone is asking, how can I check my eligibility? And Nick actually did mention that a bit earlier, but he's actually posted a link in the chat. So there's quite a simple set of criteria that are available on the Microsoft site. So if you have a look there, you'll be able to find out and quickly fill in a form and basically get an answer within, say, about a week of whether you're eligible for a number of these discounts, whether it's licensing or CRM or anything else. But essentially, if I'm not mistaken, it is that you need to be a registered charity here in the UK, and as long as you've got that registration number that you can provide them, they'll do a quick cross-reference, and then they will then they'll confirm your eligibility, and from there you'll get in through a portal, and in the portal you can actually manage some of your licensing as well as your other apps in there. So we've got another question here, which is from John, asking, if we deploy the accelerator, are we locked into that model? So I think, Ian and Wendy, this would be a question for you two.
Yeah, I'll so what we're talking about with this accelerator here is that you've got the core Dynamics platform, and then the not-for-profit accelerator sits on top. Now that gives you all sorts of things. I mean, I was just looking at a version of it this morning. We dropped into demo to a potential client, and it gives you all those entities you need, such as volunteers and donors and gifts and aid and awards and fundraising and what have you. But it is what it says on the tin. It's an accelerator. Because this is the Microsoft platform, partners like us, we can go in and we can create whatever you want. So it might be a view, a graph, a dashboard. Don't forget the power of Power Apps. We get more and more and more. We are finding, particularly actually in the charity sector, they have a particular function that they want to capture, or data they want to capture, and we can very quickly and straightforwardly produce a Power App that's available on a tablet or a phone or a desktop or whatever to meet that very specific requirement. And that is again, talking about costs, because we're using the Power Apps platform. Again, we're not talking about massive costs of producers. Once upon a time, it'd be weeks and thousands of pounds. No, it's a lot quicker these days and a lot more cost effective. No, you're not locked in. What you have is a great starter to get going. But then really it's about understanding your needs and then making the platform meet those needs and more importantly, give you the feedback you need in terms of views, graphs, dashboards, reports, accessibility, and so on.
Okay, thanks, Ian. So yeah, just to comment on that, as far as I am aware, there are two different models that you can go with. One is a kind of annual licensing or even biannual licensing, and there's another which is essentially month to month, run through the cloud service provider platform, which gives you really granular control. It gives you ability to change a bit like your mobile phone contract that you might want to change on a monthly basis. So similar to mobile phones in a way, you can run your Microsoft licensing according to how much flexibility you want, or whether you really want to lock those prices in over a longer term.
Yeah, I think just jump in there. What we'd want to do for, and we do this for all customers, is really assess their use case, and then from that determine the most cost-effective way of licensing their requirements. And that's not just now, but with an idea of looking at growth or change or bringing in different entities or different sub-organizations, what have you. So we'd do that analysis and then be able to advise on the most cost-effective method of doing that.
Okay, thanks, Ian. And just on this note of the accelerators, so Simon's just been asking just for a bit more explanation, just in a nutshell, how would you explain what this accelerator really is to someone who hasn't had any experience of it?
Yeah, sure. So what we're doing, we're happy to run one of these up as an example, and to allow people to go in there and have a go on a demo platform, and therefore they can experience this in real life, as it were. So we'd spin up a Dynamics platform. We then put the accelerator in. Now that straight away gives you the ability then to create, say, fundraising activities, income streams, donations, donors, individuals, events, and what have you, fundraising events. So that's all that language, and also the structure that you need that mirrors what a not-for-profit organisation normally expects to be able to engage with, as opposed to the manufacturing one, which talks about shop floor issues and machinery and equipment and throughput and what have you. So it straight away you have this stand-up scenario where you go, okay, so you get all that. Now, let's look at your business as usual use case. So how do you get fundraising? Is it purely through shops? Is it through donors? Is it through web donations? What have you? And then what do you do with it? And so we can look at that whole end-to-end process, and then just make some minor configuration and customizations to make that work for you. So, like I say, it's called an accelerator because it literally means you hit the deck running with something that has the language in, has a lot of the entities and structures you might need in to work for you as a not-for-profit organisation.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks, Ian. I think that's really helpful just to understand that, for example, CRM Dynamics is a massive CRM entity in itself and has so many different configurations depending on your industry. Like you say, real almost like add-ons. An add-on in this case could be a charity add-on with a volunteer management section, which has scheduling and communications and updates and all sorts, as well as a fundraising platform, where you can manage which donors are giving you what and how much and what your plan is and what you're hoping for them to give, for example. And so this accelerator would really fast track your onboarding process into that stream of Dynamics to really get you configured with everything and get a real taste for what it's capable of.
Perhaps I could just jump in again then, Patrick, as well. The other thing is we work with some charities that really leverage the benefit of the platform, because they will actually use some of the stuff that the commercial organisations use. And I'll give, for example, marketing. And I know, Patrick, you're heavily involved with that yourself. But we have charities that will actually use the marketing application of Dynamics to actually manage their communications, the whole communication strategy and event strategy. So they're using all the best practice from commercial organisations that's built into the marketing to really accelerate the way they do marketing. But if it's a small charity, that's probably way too far down the line for them at this stage. But you can pull in those elements. We have other charities use the customer service element, for example, because they have feedback. So we had one customer that managed power, supporting people with their power costs and payments, what have you, and they use customer service to manage that process. So used all the best practice that comes with case management and what have you. So some very innovative ways that charities use the platform. But the original question was, am I locked in? And the answer is no. You can build on these different elements to really move your business forward, move your charity forward as appropriate.
Can I jump in quickly, Patrick?
Yes,
I think just to kind of further add to what Ian's talking about there with regards to using the essentially the case management tools within Dynamics 365 to manage volunteers. One of the advantages you can see there is the ability to record DBS checks, things like that, that very basic bread and butter part of your charity that you have to safeguard the end user of your product, essentially. So it's not just about managing your volunteers or your membership, it's also about making sure that if you're engaging in any interaction with the people that you're actually helping, that you've got best practice built in there as well. So the accelerator will enable those things too. And you can actually have some kind of guiding the people that you've got going out and about with on-screen advice to enable them to make sure that you've got best practice kind of baked into the way your solution is working, and the way then that's encouraging those people associated with your charity to behave and respond to requests for help.
Can I pick up another point as well, because I just realised we talked an awful lot about what you guys can do in terms of the overarching security, but also in terms of the data. So once we get the data into Dynamics, then this whole issue around GDPR, but also making sure that people that need that data have access to it. So by using the Microsoft platform, once that data is in, there's a lot we can do around ensuring that only those people that need to see that data can see it through security roles and licensing, what have you, but also that but those that do need to see it can see it, so therefore they can do something powerful with it. And it's having that one pool of data, that one site of knowledge, as it were, for them to work on it, so that you always know who your donors are, who's talking to them, when they need to be spoken to again, that they've had the information about your next fundraising event, what have you. But with the comfort that you're doing it securely and with GDPR compliance built around it as well as all the security that you Patrick and Nick layer around the whole environment.
And if I may, I just want to hop back to the question, which was, you know, what will it actually do for us on a day-to-day basis? We have next steps slide at the end of this deck, which gives you some next steps. It gives you some links to check eligibility, and also there are our contact details on there should you want to take advantage of our offer to run a free demo for you so you get a closer look at it.
Thanks, Wendy. Thank you, Ian. And on that note, we would really need to wrap this up. We are running out of time, but I think that we've covered a number of the questions that have come up. And I think just as a final question that I see coming in from Simon that I will shoot over to you, Nick, if you can in a minute. Just give us a taste for what a charity with 50 employees and about 200 volunteers, you know, where would they start, I suppose, specifically from a security perspective?
It's a very good question. Thanks very much. To start from a security perspective, we would basically look at the business premium license, because you can get the first 10 free of charge. Kickstart with that, and then obviously the remaining staff can then be on a discounted rate, heavily discounted compared to the corporate. So that would be where we would start to kind of do a review of the license to help you understand what's involved, what's inside the license, and kind of like what you can get from it and how you can use it. I think a lot of this, to be honest, is just really helping people understand that Microsoft aren't what they used to be. There's a lot more under the hood, which is perhaps been quite easily missed, shall we say. So it's good to kind of have those conversations, and that's where our discovery workshops, etc., as you'll see coming up, kind of come from. And also, it's pretty much the whole main ethos of our report into the kind of IT professionals of the charity sector, and why a lot of this happens and why a lot of this exists. So yeah, it's just education. We are here to educate people. Same as Cloud 2020, we're all here to educate people. Let's just take advantage of it. Take advantage of us, take advantage of what Microsoft have to offer, and we can all be in a better position. Okay,
thanks, Nick. And thank you so much, Ian, as well as Wendy. I think this has been really informative, and we've certainly got a few questions that have come through, and hopefully we've managed to answer most of them. I think due to time we've got to cut it off at this point, but yeah, there will be a chance to get in touch and ask further questions if you like. So at this point, I'd like to thank you very much for joining us and hand over to Phoebe, who will run us through a couple of next steps.
Yeah, thanks for joining today's webinar. If you're interested in contacting Cloud 2020, the details are on the screen now, and also the same for Softwerx. You can contact Nick with the details on the screen here as well. As for the next steps with Softwerx, you can download a copy of the Microsoft Security Insight report for charities, and that's on the link on the screen now, and the same for our LinkedIn group for Microsoft Security Insights for Charities. Can join with there, and you're now eligible to take a free Microsoft Security assessment, which you can use through that link on the screen. I know Wendy previously mentioned the Cloud 2020 next steps, so I'll pass that over to her if she wants to talk through those ones.
Thank you, Phoebe. Thank you. So we're offering a free licensing assessment to make sure you're making the most of your free licensing. And then we're also offering a free demo of Microsoft's not-for-profit solution. And of course, alongside that, the opportunity to talk to us about the kinds of things you want to achieve, and really take a look and see, is this the right solution for you? And if so, are we the right partner for you to go forwards with that? So please do contact us at the contact details that are on the previous slide before. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.